Ethan Cole had never thought he would stand in a palace that seemed to float among the stars. He had spent his life managing shipments, organizing supplies, and making sure nothing went wrong. On Earth, that meant trucks, warehouses, and deadlines. Now, it meant negotiating the corridors of the Valari Palace, where every surface shimmered like liquid metal and walls seemed to hum softly as if alive. He wasn't a noble, he wasn't a hero, and he certainly didn't ask for fame. But fame had a way of finding people, especially humans. When they least expected it, it all started when the Valari, a species humanity had only seen through long-range scans and diplomatic signals, faced a crisis near their border with human colonies. A group of Valari scientists had become trapped, their research base damaged by a rogue asteroid. The humans sent a small team to help, and Ethan was part of it. He had organized the supply routes that saved the Valari team, making sure the rescue ships had fuel, food, and medical kits. The Valari noticed, and they remembered. The palace was grand in ways Ethan could barely describe. Towers spiraled upward and outward, and bridges of light connected each section. When he walked through the halls, soft light followed him, highlighting the floor patterns that shifted as if to guide him. He felt like an ant among giants, small and clumsy, in a world designed for elegance and precision. Princess Lyra was waiting in the central hall, surrounded by her court. She was smaller than he expected, with delicate features and eyes that seemed to look into a person's soul. Her presence was commanding, not through size or voice, but because she carried the weight of her people and their traditions with ease. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He wasn't used to being noticed, let alone chosen for something that felt so important. The Valari court was alive with whispers. Some were curious, some suspicious, and some openly scornful. To them, humans were unpredictable. They had no formal titles, no centuries of ceremony, no understanding of the subtleties of Valari law, and yet here he was, standing in front of the princess, because she had seen something in him that others did not. Lyra spoke in a voice that was soft, but firm, addressing her people. In the tradition of the Valari, a future queen may choose a guardian, someone to guide her through the responsibilities of leadership. That choice is sacred and must be respected. The court listened with varying degrees of respect and skepticism. Ethan could feel their eyes on him, their judgment weighing him down like a physical weight. Then, without warning, she gestured at him. "Ethan Cole," she said clearly, each word echoing through the hall. "I choose him." There was a silence so deep it felt like the air itself had stopped moving. Ethan's mind struggled to process what he had just heard. He was just a human, someone who organized things and followed instructions, and yet he had been chosen. The meaning behind her choice was profound in Valari culture. A guardian was not just a protector, they were a guide, a symbol, a living anchor for the future queen. This role was usually reserved for Valari of noble blood, or those trained from childhood. Ethan had neither. Dr. Lisa Morgan, the human cultural expert who had accompanied him, whispered, "Ethan, stay calm. It's okay, breathe." Her hand was light on his shoulder, grounding him in a world that felt increasingly unreal. Ethan nodded, trying to steady his racing heart. He knew that any sudden movement or wrong word could make this situation worse. Yet in his chest, a quiet fire began to burn. He wanted to honor her trust, even if he didn't fully understand it yet. The court erupted into murmurs. Some nobles were clearly unhappy. "How can a human guide our princess?" One whispered sharply to another. "This is unprecedented," said another. The murmurs grew louder, but Lyra raised her hand. The room fell silent almost immediately. "This choice is mine," she said firmly. "He is human, yes, but he carries the qualities of protection, patience, and understanding. These are what I seek. Not titles, not bloodlines. I choose him because he can see without fear, act without selfishness, and stand without demand." Ethan felt a strange warmth at her words. He had never been praised in such a formal, public way, and yet it was not praise that mattered, it was trust. And trust, he realized, was heavier than any medal, more binding than any contract. Still, The challenges were clear. The Valari had strict laws and ancient customs, and a human standing in this sacred role would be seen by many as a breach of tradition. Ethan could feel the eyes of the court, some burning with suspicion, others with disbelief. He knew he had to earn their respect, not demand it. Over the next hours, he observed the rituals that the Valari held sacred. He watched how the courtiers moved, how they spoke in subtle gestures and tones, and how every action carried weight. Dr. Morgan explained quietly, "Every step here is a lesson, Ethan. Watch and learn. Understand before you act."
Act. He did.
He watched the subtle glances exchanged among the Valari nobles, the hidden nods, the shifts in stance that conveyed messages words could not. It was like learning a new language without letters or sounds. He listened to the whispers of the attendants, understood the deference to the princess, and began to feel a rhythm to the palace life. Despite the grandeur and the expectations, Ethan found small moments of connection. A young Valari child approached him, curious and unafraid. He smiled, offered a hand, and the child took it. That simple gesture, unnoticed by most, felt like a bridge between two worlds. Then came the first dinner in the palace. Ethan sat among Valari dignitaries, a place of honor, but also of scrutiny. Food was unfamiliar, flavors strange, and rituals around eating precise and formal. He focused on his manners, copying subtle motions, showing respect. The dignitaries watched closely, and some even smiled slightly at his careful attention. It was a small victory, but in a world so vast and different, meant something. Lyra sat beside him, and her presence was calming. She explained parts of Valari law in a soft voice, revealing the depth of responsibility he now carried. Every decision he would make could influence not just the palace, but the future of the entire empire. The weight of it pressed down on him, but instead of fear, a strange determination grew. The night ended with a walk along a balcony that overlooked the sprawling palace gardens. Stars reflected in the pools below, and alien flora glowed softly, as if the entire world was welcoming him. Lyra spoke of her hopes and fears, of the burdens of leadership that had never been shared before. Ethan listened, offering what small comfort he could. He realized then that being chosen was not about power. It was about presence, about being steady when everything else wavered. Sleep came uneasy, with dreams of the palace, of the Valari people, and of his new role. But along with the unease came a sense of purpose. He was not a hero, he was not a noble, and he was not even fully prepared. But he had been chosen. And for the first time in his life, he felt that perhaps being chosen was more than luck. It was a call to be the best version of oneself. Not for glory, but for someone else. As dawn approached, the palace began to stir. Humans and Valari alike prepared for another day of challenges, negotiations, and expectations. Ethan stood quietly, taking in the scene. It was overwhelming, yes, but it was also a chance to prove that humanity, even in its simplest form, could stand for something greater. That a human, not by bloodline but by character, could hold the trust of a princess, perhaps change the way the species saw each other. He took a deep breath, steadying himself for the day ahead. He did not know what the future held, but he knew that the first step had already been taken. Princess Lyra had chosen him, and now it was his task to be worthy of that choice. And as he stepped into the light of the new day, Ethan felt the quiet strength of someone who had just realized that being human, in all its simplicity and complexity, could be enough to change the galaxy. The days following Ethan's selection as princess, Lyra's chosen guardian, were filled with tension and uncertainty. The Valari court had not forgotten centuries of tradition, and many saw his presence as a challenge to their way of life. Noble factions whispered behind closed doors, questioning why a human, an outsider, could hold such an important role. Ethan felt their eyes wherever he went, a constant reminder that respect was not given freely. It had to be earned. Ethan had expected challenges, no, but he did not anticipate how much he would struggle with self-doubt. Every morning, he rehearsed small acts of patience and understanding, hoping to meet the expectations placed upon him. He attended formal meetings with Lyra, observing how she spoke, how she negotiated, and how she balanced authority with compassion. In these moments, he felt both inspired and intimidated. She was wise beyond her years, and the weight of leadership rested lightly on her shoulders, a burden he could barely imagine. Dr. Lisa Morgan became an invaluable guide during this time. She explained the subtleties of Valari customs, helping him interpret gestures and unspoken rules. They test character through observation, she told him one evening. The nobility will watch how you act when nothing seems at stake. They will watch when small things go wrong. Every glance, every word, every choice is noted. Ethan began to understand the patience required. He realized that actions mattered more than words. When a Valari servant dropped a tray of delicate instruments, he did not scold, but calmly helped, showing care and understanding. When a group of young nobles tried to challenge his presence at a ceremonial event, he stood quietly, responding with politeness instead of anger. These small gestures slowly began to shift the perception of some court members, though not all. Princess Lyra observed his efforts with quiet approval. In private, she explained why she had chosen him. Humans have a way of seeing truth without being blinded by tradition, she said. You act because it is right, not because it is expected. That is what I need by my side. Her words comforted Ethan, but they also reminded him of the responsibility he now carried. The tension grew as rival factions began to make more direct challenges. Noble advisors pressured Lyra to reconsider her choice, arguing that Ethan could not understand Valari politics, culture, or law. Some even suggested that his presence might invite danger from neighboring systems who saw humans as unpredictable. Ethan listened without interrupting, focusing on learning and understanding rather than arguing. His restraint surprised many Valari observers, who expected a human to respond with defensiveness or pride. One afternoon, a public demonstration was held to display Valari culture to the humans. Ethan was invited to participate, though not to lead. The demonstration included precise dances, complex rituals, and displays of skill with traditional Valari instruments. Ethan fumbled at first, his human body unfamiliar with the movements and rhythm. The nobles whispered among themselves, and Ethan felt a pang of embarrassment. But Lyra simply nodded at him, her eyes encouraging him to try again. With careful observation and determination, he slowly began to match the motions, earning a few nods and smiles from the audience. These small victories were crucial. They showed that Ethan was willing to learn and adapt, even when it was uncomfortable or challenging. He realized that his role as guardian was not about power or authority. It was about being present, being patient, and showing that humans could respect and honor Valari ways without losing their own integrity. As the days passed, threats from rival factions grew bolder. Ethan learned that some nobles were plotting to undermine the alliance between humans and Valari, hoping to remove him and weaken Lyra's position. One evening, while walking through the palace gardens, he overheard two nobles discussing plans to frame humans for a minor disaster that had occurred on a distant colony. Ethan felt a surge of responsibility. It was not his fight alone, but he could not stand by and let innocent humans be blamed for actions they had not committed. He confided in Dr. Morgan and Lyra about what he had overheard. Together, they devised a plan to gather evidence discreetly and ensure that the truth would come to light. Ethan found that his human perspective, grounded in practicality and observation, provided insights that the Valari had overlooked. He noticed patterns in the behavior of the nobles, small inconsistencies in their stories, and subtle clues that indicated deception. The process was slow and painstaking, but each discovery strengthened his confidence. During this time, Ethan also formed unexpected connections with the Valari citizens who were not part of the court. They watched him with curiosity, often testing his patience and observing his behavior. Ethan treated them with respect, listening to their concerns and offering help where he could. He began to understand the subtle ways in which humans and Valar could learn from each other, not through force or orders, but through empathy and cooperation. One incident highlighted the growing trust between Ethan and the Valari. A group of children had become trapped in a collapsed area of the palace gardens after a sudden storm. The official guards hesitated, unsure of the safest approach. Ethan did not pause. He assessed the situation, coordinated with available personnel, and carefully guided the children to safety. The Valari watched in awe as a human with no formal combat training or noble lineage had acted decisively and effectively to protect their young. This event became a turning point, slowly shifting public perception in his favor. Despite these successes, Ethan struggled with self-doubt. He often questioned whether he truly belonged in the palace, whether he could meet the expectations of the princess and the Valari people. Lyra noticed his hesitation and reminded him gently, "You are not meant to be like us, Ethan. You are human. That is why you are needed. Your perspective, your patience, and your willingness to act with care are what make you strong." Ethan took her words to heart, learning to embrace his humanity rather than trying to fit into a role that was not his by nature. He began to see that strength was not measured by rank or bloodline, but by character, courage, and empathy. Each challenge, each test, and each observation became an opportunity to grow and to show that humans could be reliable partners, not just outsiders. As the weeks passed, the alliance between humans and Valari began to stabilize, thanks in part to Ethan's efforts. The court still had skeptics, but more nobles and citizens began to recognize the value of a human presence in the palace. Ethan learned to navigate the delicate politics, building quiet alliances and earning respect not through force, but through patience and understanding. Ethan also developed a deeper bond with Princess Lyra. They spent long hours discussing philosophy, leadership, and the responsibilities of ruling. Lyra shared stories of Valari history, victories, and mistakes. Ethan shared human experiences, the ways people organized, adapted, and cared for one another. Through these conversations, a mutual respect and understanding grew, laying the foundation for a partnership that went beyond titles or obligations. By the end of the second part of his journey, Ethan realized that being chosen was not just an honor. It was a responsibility that required constant learning, patience, and courage. Every decision, every action, and every interaction mattered. The court was watching. The citizens were watching. And the future of the alliance depended on the strength of character displayed in even the smallest moments. Ethan had faced resistance, learned the nuances of an alien culture, and begun to prove himself not by trying to be Valari, but by being the best human he could be. He understood that the trials were only beginning, but he also knew that with patience, empathy, and determination, he could meet the challenges ahead. And as he walked through the palace gardens one evening, Lyra by his side, he felt a quiet sense of purpose and readiness for whatever the future might hold. Ethan. Cole had grown more confident in his role, but he knew the true tests were yet to come. The Valari had traditions designed to measure the character of those chosen to guide their leaders. These were not battles of strength or displays of power. They were trials of intent, patience, and sacrifice. Every action, every choice, every response was carefully observed. The Valari wanted to know whether the chosen guardian could act with integrity, even when no one was watching. The first trial began quietly. Ethan was asked to spend a day with the palace servants, not as a visitor, but as one of them. He cleaned, arranged supplies, and helped with the smallest tasks, all under the watchful eyes of the Valari nobles. At first it felt humiliating. His hands were not accustomed to their delicate tasks, and mistakes were inevitable. But he persisted. He apologized when he stumbled, and he learned quickly from each mistake. The nobles watched silently, noting his patience and willingness to learn without complaint. This was not about doing the work perfectly. It was about humility and empathy. Next came the test of restraint. A group of young Valari nobles attempted to provoke him with harsh words and subtle insults. It would have been easy for Ethan to respond defensively or with anger, but he remained calm. He listened, acknowledged their feelings, and spoke only when necessary, using kindness and reason. Slowly, the nobles began to see that he was different. He did not act out of pride or ego. He acted from a place of understanding, and that made him stronger than they expected. Captain Alex Grant, a human colleague who had come to observe and support Ethan, provided assistance when needed but never interfered. He understood that Ethan had to earn respect on his own terms. Sometimes, he would quietly step in to explain human practices or clarify misunderstandings. But he never solved problems for Ethan. This reinforced the idea that leadership was not about commanding others, but about guiding and supporting them. One of the most significant trials came unexpectedly. A city's shield, designed to protect the palace from meteor storms, failed during a sudden crisis. Valari children were trapped in the outer gardens, and chaos erupted as the staff scrambled to maintain safety. Ethan did not wait for orders. He assessed the situation, coordinated rescue efforts, and personally guided children to safety. His calm presence and quick thinking saved lives. Valari citizens and nobles alike watched in astonishment as a human, with no formal training in their ways, acted decisively and selflessly. The aftermath of the shield failure brought new attention to Ethan. Many of the nobility could no longer deny his value. He had proven that action, guided by care and reason, mattered more than birthright or tradition. Princess Lyra praised him privately, acknowledging his courage and patience. "You see the truth in what needs to be done," she said. "That is why I chose you. You act because it is right, not because it is expected." As Ethan navigated these trials, he also began to understand the subtleties of Valari communication. Gestures, tone, and timing carried meanings deeper than words. A nod, a glance, or a shift in stance could reveal allegiance, suspicion, or respect. Ethan learned to read these cues, gradually gaining insight into the complex social web of the palace. It was not an easy process, but each discovery strengthened his ability to act wisely and effectively. The trials were not only public but private as well. Ethan was tasked with making difficult decisions in simulated scenarios designed to test his judgment and compassion. One scenario involved allocating limited resources between two villages, each claiming urgent need. Ethan listened to both sides, considered the long-term consequences, and made a decision that balanced fairness with practicality. The Valari observers recorded his choices carefully, impressed by his thoughtful approach. In addition to these structured tests, Ethan faced moral challenges in daily life. He encountered nobles attempting to manipulate situations for personal gain, servants burdened by excessive work, and citizens struggling with inequality. In every case, he acted with fairness, integrity, and empathy, demonstrating that his guidance was grounded in care, not ambition. These small acts built trust slowly, proving that a human could indeed fulfill a sacred role within Valari culture. Ethan also grew closer to the people of the palace. He found joy in simple interactions, such as sharing meals with children, listening to artisans describe their work, and helping with repairs. These moments reminded him that leadership was not just about grand gestures, but also about everyday acts of presence and support. The Valari began to notice that his actions inspired loyalty and cooperation, not fear or resentment. Princess Lyra remained a constant source of guidance. She shared stories of her ancestors, explaining how past leaders had succeeded or failed based on their ability to act with empathy and wisdom. Ethan absorbed these lessons, applying them to his own decisions. He realized that being chosen was not about immediate success, but about building trust, showing consistency, and demonstrating character over time. As the trials continued, Ethan faced a test of endurance. He was asked to spend a night alone in the outer gardens during a simulated crisis, the challenge of maintaining calm and protecting the area from imagined threats. The gardens, illuminated by bioluminescent plants, seemed serene, but the isolation was intense. Ethan focused on observation, reflection, and preparation, demonstrating resilience and steady judgment. When the morning arrived, the Valari praised his composure. Noting that true leadership required patience and self-control, the final trial involved collaboration. Ethan was paired with a Valari noble to plan a small relief mission for a distant village affected by a natural disaster. Differences in approach and priorities caused friction, but Ethan used diplomacy, listening, and compromise to achieve the goal. The successful mission demonstrated that he could work effectively with others, even those who initially doubted him. The Valari recognized that a guardian must bridge gaps, not dominate. and Ethan had done exactly that. Through all these trials, Ethan reflected on the qualities that had brought him here. Courage, patience, empathy, and integrity were not innate or automatic. They were choices made consistently in small and large moments alike. He began to understand that the trials were not only tests imposed by the Valeri, they were opportunities to grow, to prove his worth, and to show that humanity could contribute meaningfully to a culture far different from their own. By the end of these trials, quiet shift occurred in the palace. Skepticism lingered, but respect began to replace doubt. Some nobles openly acknowledged Ethan's capability, while others watched silently, waiting for the next challenge. The citizens began to see him as more than an outsider. They saw a protector, a guide, and someone who could act decisively and compassionately in critical moments. Princess Lyra observed these changes with satisfaction. She recognized that her choice was not just about selecting a guardian. It was about setting a new standard for cooperation between humans and Valeri. Ethan had shown that strength and leadership were not about bloodlines or tradition alone, but about character, consistency, and empathy. As Ethan walked through the palace that evening, he reflected on how far he had come. The trials had tested him in ways he had never imagined, but they had also revealed his own capacity for resilience and growth. He was not a hero in the traditional sense, but he had proven that humans could earn trust and respect through actions, understanding, and quiet determination. He paused on a balcony overlooking the glowing gardens, thinking about the days ahead. Challenges would continue, and dangers would arise, but he felt ready. He had faced trials of patience, restraint, empathy, endurance, and collaboration. Each one had strengthened his confidence and clarified his purpose. Ethan realized that being chosen was not a title to bear. Lightly, it was a responsibility to live every day, proving through deeds that he was worthy of the trust placed in him. The palace, alive with shimmering light and gentle hums, seemed to welcome him as he moved through it. Ethan understood that his role was not about dominance or control, but about presence, guidance, and steady support. He was learning to act not from fear or ambition, but from understanding and care. In doing so, he was not only proving his worth to the Valeri, but also discovering a new sense of purpose and belonging. As the night deepened, Ethan knew that the next phase of his journey would be even more challenging. The trials had tested his character, but real threats often came from hidden enemies, ambition, and misunderstanding. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also the quiet strength that comes from knowing one has done the right things. Consistently, with care and integrity, with Princess Lyra by his side. In a growing understanding of the Valeri people, Ethan stepped forward into the unknown. He was ready to face what came next, knowing that every choice, every action, and every moment mattered. In the heart of the palace, among the stars, he was no longer just a human visitor. He was a guardian, a guide, and a symbol of the trust and collaboration that could unite to very different worlds. Ethan Cole had learned to navigate the palace, the trials, and the delicate balance of Valeri society. But nothing could have prepared him for the coup that came from within. It began subtly, with whispers in the corridors and secret meetings among discontented nobles. They feared the influence of a human at the heart of their culture and resented Princess Lyra for choosing him. Ethan felt the tension like a storm gathering in the distance, knowing it could strike at any moment. One evening, during a quiet walk with Lyra through the palace gardens, Ethan noticed shadows moving unnaturally among the hedges. He felt a chill and instinctively drew closer to the princess. Lyra, always composed, noticed his unease. "There are forces within the court who seek to challenge my choice," she said calmly. "We must be careful. Not all who bow before us are loyal." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. This was no longer a matter of patience or proving himself in trials. This was a matter of survival and protecting the one he had pledged to serve. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him more heavily than ever before. The coup began in earnest the next morning. Loyal palace guards were overpowered in key locations, and rumors spread that humans were to blame for the unrest. Ethan knew that any aggressive response could escalate the situation, so he chose to stand quietly, observing and listening. His calm presence was deliberate, strategy to prevent panic and maintain control. Princess Lyra was taken to a secure part of the palace by her closest aides. Including Ethan, they found themselves in a room that shimmered with soft light, designed for counsel and strategy. Lyra's eyes were steady, though the tension in the room was palpable. "We must expose the true instigators without inciting further violence," she said. "Ethan, you will help me see the truth?" Together, they began piecing together information. Ethan's human perspective allowed him to notice inconsistencies in the nobles, stories that Valari observers had overlooked. He tracked subtle signs of deceit, noting who avoided eye contact, whose gestures betrayed fear or guilt. Each observation became a clue, guiding them toward the conspirators. Emma Brooks, a Valari aide who had quietly supported Ethan since his arrival, provided invaluable assistance. She knew the hidden passageways, secret messages, and minor rituals that could expose the rebels' plans. Working together, they gathered evidence methodically, ensuring that when the moment came, they could confront the leaders decisively. The palace was tense. Citizens and loyal guards moved quietly, wary of triggering any misstep. Ethan and Lyra walked through corridors with measured steps, their presence a silent declaration that they were aware and prepared. The conspirators, confident in their secrecy, began to show cracks in their composure, unaware that their plans were being observed and documented. One key moment came when Ethan identified a group of nobles attempting to manipulate the palace records, rewriting history to place humans in a negative light. He calmly intercepted the documents, comparing them with the originals stored securely in the archives. His careful attention to detail revealed the deception, providing irrefutable evidence of the coup's organizers. Lyra, Ethan at her side, convened a council of loyal nobles and advisors. She presented the evidence in a manner both firm and measured, ensuring that truth was emphasized over emotion. The conspirators were confronted, and under the weight of their exposure, their plans unraveled. Some attempted to argue, but Ethan's presence and calm demeanor reinforced Lyra's authority, leaving the rebels with little room to maneuver throughout the crisis. Ethan made a conscious choice to remain unarmed and non-violent. He understood that force would only deepen mistrust and escalate conflict. Instead, he relied on observation, careful planning, and moral clarity to guide actions. This approach, unfamiliar to the Valari nobles, became a lesson in leadership and restraint, demonstrating that courage did not always require weapons. The citizens of the palace, many of whom had been skeptical of humans, witnessed Ethan's approach. They saw a human acting with integrity, fairness, and determination, protecting the princess without domination. Trust began to grow, not through fear, but through example. People began to understand that leadership could be rooted in character, not just tradition or power. The coup's failure was as much a triumph of strategy as of ethics. Ethan and Lyra had demonstrated that calm observation, thoughtful action, and transparency could overcome deceit and ambition. The rebels were held accountable, not through excessive punishment, but through exposure and the restoration of order. The message was clear. Integrity and trust mattered more than titles or lineage. As the palace returned to normalcy, Ethan found moments of quiet reflection. The experience had tested him in ways that no trial or ritual could. He had faced human and Valari alike, navigating deception, ambition, and fear. Through it all, he had relied on presence, understanding, and careful action. The bond with Princess Lyra had deepened, built not only on choice, but on shared responsibility and mutual respect. The court began to shift. Some nobles openly acknowledged Ethan's capability, while others remained cautious but watchful. The citizens' perception had changed significantly. Where there had been doubt, there was now recognition. Where there had been fear, there was now trust. Ethan had proven that being chosen was not about command or authority, it was about character, integrity, and consistent, compassionate action. Lyra addressed the court formally, her voice calm yet commanding. She spoke of the importance of wisdom over strength, compassion over ambition, and unity over division. She credited Ethan's guidance as instrumental in navigating the crisis, highlighting that humans could act with fairness, courage, and thoughtfulness. Her words resonated, reinforcing the idea that this was not a human versus Valari issue but a partnership built on respect and shared values. Ethan observed the court, noting the subtle changes in posture, expression, and tone. He realized that leadership was as much about influence and example as it was about decisions. His presence had shifted the balance, showing that humans could contribute meaningfully without seeking dominance. In the days following the coup, Ethan continued to act with care, ensuring that the palace operated smoothly and that the citizens felt secure. He maintained relationships with loyal nobles, guiding them quietly, without imposing authority. The palace began to function as a cohesive unit again, strengthened by the lessons learned during the crisis. Princess Lyra remained a source of guidance and inspiration. She emphasized that challenges would continue, but the response to the coup had set a precedent. Humans and Valari could work together, not through force or hierarchy alone, but through mutual respect, patience, and integrity. Ethan absorbed these lessons, understanding that his role was ongoing, not limited to a single event or trial. Through this experience, Ethan also reflected on his own growth. He had come to the palace as an outsider, uncertain and cautious. Now, he understood that being chosen was not about privilege or recognition. It was about responsibility, presence, and consistent, thoughtful action. He had learned to navigate complex social structures, confront deception, and act decisively without resorting to aggression. As the sun set over the palace, Ethan and Lyra walked through the gardens, the soft light casting long shadows among the glowing plants. Ethan felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a quiet anticipation for what lay ahead. The coup had been overcome, but challenges would not end. New trials, both internal and external, would test them in ways they could not yet predict. Ethan understood that his journey was far from over. He had proven himself capable in crisis. But the true measure of a guardian was in daily choices, ongoing vigilance, and the ability to act with integrity in every situation. He was ready to continue, strengthened by experience and guided by the trust placed in him by Princess Lyra and the Valari people. The palace hummed softly, live with light, sound, and motion. Ethan moved through it with confidence, aware of the responsibility he carried, but also of the strength he had discovered within himself. He was no longer just a visitor or a chosen human. He was a guardian, a guide, and a symbol of the trust, cooperation, and understanding that could unite two very different worlds. Ethan Cole stood on the balcony of the palace, watching the first light of the new day spill across the gardens. The events of the past weeks had tested him in ways he had never imagined, but they had also shaped him into someone more confident and more aware of his responsibilities. He was no longer simply a human visitor in the Valari palace. He was a guardian, a guide, and a symbol of trust between two species. The trials, the coup, and the daily challenges had shown him that leadership was not about power or control. It was about presence, understanding, and consistent action. Every choice he had made, every act of patience, and every effort to understand the Valari culture had earned him the respect of those who once doubted him. The palace, once filled with whispers of skepticism, now hummed with quiet approval and trust. Princess Lyra joined him on the balcony, her presence calm and reassuring. She had become more than a leader to Ethan. She was a partner in responsibility, someone whose trust he could rely on and whose guidance he respected deeply. Together they had navigated complex political intrigues, protected the citizens, and demonstrated that collaboration could triumph over tradition-bound skepticism. "The palace feels different today," Lyra said softly, her gaze sweeping over the gardens. "The people are calmer, the nobles more respectful, and the alliance stronger." "Your actions have made a difference, Ethan," he nodded, feeling a quiet pride. Not pride in himself alone, but in the partnership they had built. "It was not just me," he replied. "It was all of us working together, listening and acting with care. That is what earned their trust." The new day brought new responsibilities. Ethan oversaw training and coordination for human and Valari teams, working together on border patrols and disaster relief missions. These were not just exercises in skill, but opportunities to build understanding and cooperation. Humans shared practical solutions, while Valari contributed their knowledge of the stars and advanced technologies. The exchange of ideas strengthened both sides, fostering mutual respect. Ethan also focused on the palace citizens. He visited artisans, craftsmen, and young apprentices, listening to their concerns and offering guidance. He encouraged collaboration, helping them see that a human could contribute positively without imposing authority. Slowly, the culture of the palace began to shift, embracing cooperation over hierarchy, empathy over rigid tradition. The successes were not without challenges. Occasionally, whispers of dissent still reached Ethan's ears. Some nobles were cautious, reluctant to fully accept a human in such a sacred role. Ethan knew that earning complete trust would take time. He was patient, understanding that respect and credibility were built through consistent action and integrity. One day, a new opportunity arose to further strengthen the human-Valari alliance. A distant colony faced a natural disaster, and Ethan was tasked with leading a joint relief mission. The challenge required careful planning, resource management, and coordination across cultures. Ethan approached the task methodically, drawing on lessons learned from past trials and crises. The mission was a success. Human and Valari teams worked seamlessly, each learning from the other and appreciating their differences. The relief effort saved lives and provided hope to the affected colony, reinforcing the idea that humans could act responsibly and compassionately, even in unfamiliar territories. Reports of the mission reached the palace and the broader Valari Empire, further solidifying Ethan's credibility and the trust placed in him by Princess Lyra. Back at the palace, Ethan continued to grow in his role. He guided discussions on policy, helped mediate disputes, and served as a bridge between humans and Valari. His human perspective, rooted in practicality and empathy, proved invaluable in resolving conflicts and fostering understanding. He was no longer just a guardian. He was a respected advisor and a symbol of cooperation. Princess Lyra watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. She had chosen Ethan not for his status, but for his character, his patience, and his willingness to act with care. Time and again, he had proven that her choice was wise. The court, once divided, began to see that humans could offer qualities that complemented Valari's leadership rather than threatening it. Ethan also reflected on his personal growth. The journey had taught him that strength was not measured by dominance or command, but by integrity, empathy, and consistent action. Leadership was not about making others follow blindly, but about inspiring trust, listening carefully, and acting decisively when it mattered most. He understood that these lessons would guide him long after his formal trials were complete. In a quiet moment, Ethan walked through the palace gardens alone, reflecting on the path that had brought him here. From a human logistics officer to the chosen guardian of an alien princess, his life had changed in ways he could never have predicted. He felt gratitude for the trust placed in him, and a deep sense of responsibility to live up to it. He encountered citizens and young nobles in the gardens, each greeting him with respect and curiosity. Children ran to show him small discoveries. Artisans shared new creations. Apprentices asked questions about his experiences. Ethan listened, shared advice, and encouraged them, reinforcing the idea that leadership was about guidance and support rather than authority. The palace buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose. Humans and Valari worked together more closely than ever, understanding that cooperation and mutual respect were the keys to a stronger, safer, and more prosperous future. Ethan's presence was central to this transformation, not because of his status, but because of his consistent demonstration of empathy, patience, and courage. Princess Lyra and Ethan spent time together planning for the future. They discussed strategies to strengthen alliances, policies to support citizens, and ways to ensure that human contributions were valued without disrupting Valari traditions. These conversations solidified their partnership, blending human practicality with Valari wisdom. The result was a new approach to governance that balanced tradition with innovation, respect with progress. As the days passed, Ethan came to realize the full significance of being chosen. It was not a title or a role to wield power, but a responsibility to act with integrity, to support others, to demonstrate the potential of collaboration between species. He understood that his actions would influence not only the palace but the broader perception of humanity across the Valari Empire. Ethan also learned that leadership required humility. He accepted that he did not have all the answers, that mistakes would happen, and that he could learn from others, including the Valari. By embracing humility, he earned trust and respect, showing that being human was not a limitation, but a strength when combined with integrity and empathy. In the evenings, Ethan often walked with Princess Lyra through the glowing gardens. Discussing their experiences, hopes, and dreams, they shared quiet moments of reflection, understanding that their bond was more than formal obligation. It was built on mutual respect, trust, and shared responsibility. Together, they symbolized a new era of cooperation, a bridge between two cultures that had once been separated by distance and misunderstanding. The palace itself seemed to embody this transformation. The halls, once tense with skepticism, now resonated with cooperation and harmony. Citizens and nobles alike adapted to the presence of humans, recognizing their contributions and valuing their perspectives. Ethan's role as guardian and guide had redefined expectations, showing that trust, integrity, and consistent action could bridge even the widest cultural divides. As Ethan stood once more on the balcony, looking out over the palace and the surrounding landscape, he felt a profound sense of purpose. He had been chosen not for who he was by rank or title, but for who he was as a person. That choice, that trust, had guided him through trials, crises, and challenges, shaping him into someone capable of guiding, supporting, and protecting. He understood that the future would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new responsibilities. But he felt ready. With Princess Lyra at his side, with the trust of the Valari people, and with the lessons he had learned as a human guardian, he was prepared to face whatever came next. Ethan realized that the story was not just about one human and one princess. It was about the potential for understanding, collaboration, and trust between two very different worlds. It was about the choices people make, the actions they take, and the integrity they show in moments of challenge. It was about humans being chosen not for their power, but for their humanity. And as the sun rose higher, casting light across the palace and the gardens, Ethan knew that this was just the beginning of a shared future, one where humans and Valari could stand together, learn from each other, and build a world guided by trust, empathy, and mutual respect. In that moment, he felt the quiet strength of being chosen, the responsibility it carried, and the promise of a future shaped by integrity, courage, and human spirit. Ethan Cole stood in the palace courtyard, feeling the morning sun warm his face. The days since the coup had been full of rebuilding, planning, and careful diplomacy. The palace was alive again with activity, not just from the Valari, but from humans who had come to work alongside them. Together, they were creating a new model for cooperation, one that would serve as an example for the entire galaxy. Princess Lyra joined him quietly, walking with a calm authority that contrasted with the tension still lingering in the background. Ethan noticed how the light caught the edges of her robes, highlighting the subtle designs that marked her status. She spoke softly, but her words carried weight. "The people are beginning to see what we can achieve together," she said. "It is not just about protection or guidance, Ethan. It is about building trust and showing that different worlds can work as one." Ethan nodded, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. From a human logistics officer to the chosen guardian of an alien princess, he had grown in ways he could never have anticipated. Every challenge, every trial, and every act of patience had contributed to his understanding of leadership, integrity, and responsibility. Now, he had to apply those lessons to a new challenge, ensuring that the collaboration between humans and Valari endured beyond immediate crises. The first task was education. Ethan worked with Valari teachers and human, cultural experts to develop programs that would help both species understand each other better. They introduced classes on human customs, communication styles, and problem-solving approaches. Valari citizens shared their history, philosophy, and scientific knowledge. By learning from each other, both humans and Valari began to appreciate the value of cooperation and empathy. Ethan also focused on training. He coordinated exercises that tested problem-solving, teamwork, and decision-making under pressure. Humans and Valari were paired in mixed teams, learning to combine their strengths and compensate for weaknesses. Ethan observed these sessions carefully, offering guidance and encouragement without dominating. He wanted to ensure that humans contributed, but that Valari retained ownership of their own culture and traditions. During one of these training exercises, a simulated disaster tested their coordination. A human transport ship had reportedly malfunctioned near a Valari settlement, and both species had to respond. Ethan acted quickly, guiding the response with calm authority. Humans provided technical solutions, while Valari offered advanced energy shields and environmental support. Together, they managed the simulated crisis with efficiency and care. Earning praise from both communities, Ethan realized that these exercises were more than practical training. There were opportunities to build trust and understanding. Each success reinforced the idea that humans could act responsibly and thoughtfully in Valari society. Each mistake carefully analyzed and corrected became a lesson for both species. The palace began to feel like a place of learning, cooperation, and shared purpose. While the training and education programs were progressing, Ethan also addressed political concerns. Some nobles still viewed humans with suspicion, fearing that their presence might undermine traditional authority. Ethan engaged with them respectfully, listening to their concerns, acknowledging their fears, and offering solutions that respected Valari customs while incorporating human insight. Gradually, even the skeptics began to see the potential benefits of collaboration. Princess Lyra supported him in these efforts, meeting with nobles, mediating disputes, and reinforcing the message that humans were allies, not competitors. Together, they set a tone of respect, cooperation, and shared responsibility. Ethan noted how the palace atmosphere shifted over time. Where tension had once been thick, there was now curiosity, cautious optimism, and even moments of humor.